Hi, my name is Becky. I am a trauma focused therapist in Utah, and I work at the intersection of abuse, Mormonism, and narcissism. I've been a therapist for 10 years, and um, my main focus is recovering from that type of abuse. Um, a little bit about me and why I became interested in this particular area of helping people is that I was married to somebody who is narcissistic, and I was also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or more commonly known as a Mormon. Um, it's really complicated and complex to um, like unpack all of that and unpack how um, abuse is fostered in those types of systems of religion that are, well, fostered in any system really that doesn't have like equality for its members or doesn't have checks and balances on people who are in power. And so, common high demand religions um, just are places that people who are abusive can thrive, really, because it creates environments where um, people are more easily victimized. For example, like in Mormonism, women are taught from a very young age, as small children, girls are taught to um, be sweet and kind and good and accommodating, um, which are not necessarily bad traits for anybody to have, really, but in the context of an abusive system, which I see the Mormon church as an abusive system, it's a way that kind of sets up women and girls to become victimized more easily and actually kind of choose that because they think that is the right thing to do, and it's like what's expected of them, and kind of puts them a lot of women and girls in this position. Not all of them, but certainly quite a lot of them. So I, in my work as a therapist, I work mainly with women recovering from abuse, any type of abuse, really. I do work with some men also, but mainly with women. And my counseling business is called Through the Woods Counseling. And I do trauma focused therapy in Utah, and nationwide in the US, I do coaching for recovering from abuse. And I it just is because of where I came from and my experiences. Um, I just really am passionate about bringing awareness to these problems that I see happening still today in Mormonism. And I've also worked with people who were raised or grew up in other religions and have had similar issues. And so I find it very fulfilling to help people unpack all of that and understand how these types of systems that can be very controlling and demanding impacted their life and the choices they made, and help them find like their true self and their true like their authenticity, really, and help them uh, learn to thrive. People, victims of abuse, are victimized by perpetrators of abuse, and then they become survivors. after surviving it, getting out of it, they become a survivor. And sometimes the challenge is learning to thrive after that. And what does that look like? And that can be different for everybody. But for me, it was, I survived it. Um, I would say in my marriage, I was victimized for almost 22 years, I would say. Not physically beaten and abused that way, but the abuse I endured was more psychological, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial. Um, and my ex-husband was very, very good at manipulation and the use of coercive control, which I'll talk about what coercive control is and what it looks like and how you can kind of understand that better and if it's happening to you. But coercive control is a really foundational piece of abuse. And um, not only was I experiencing that coercive control in my marriage, but also in the system of the Mormon church. Um, Coercive control is this concept that people can use as a way to manipulate someone to do something they would want them to do, elicit a behavior they would like. So it's for an example, a personal example I had in my marriage was my ex-husband was a person who is a person. He's still a person who did not want people to wear shoes in our home. So when people would come to the home, they would be asked to remove their shoes. Well, there was a time where I had been kind of estranged from my father for a couple of years because my father, ironically, had asked me at about 4.5, 5 years into my marriage if I was being abused. And by that time, I was firmly convinced that the way things were going in my relationship with my ex-husband were my fault because of the coercive control and gaslighting, which is also something that people may be more familiar with, but we'll also discuss that as well. But with the coercive control, so with my dad, who I'd been estranged from, because when he came to me and asked me about that, I felt so much shame, like some really intense shame, because I blamed myself for the way things were going. And so I told my dad that I was not, even though I was. My ex husband would have violent outbursts and a violent temper where he would um, yell and call me names and he would break things. And if I would, for instance, lock myself in the bedroom or the bathroom to kind of get away from him till he calmed down because it was scary. He's bigger and stronger than me. Um, he would kick the door in. And like I said, he never sometimes he pushed me, sometimes he shoved me. Um, but his main form of physical abuse was breaking things in front of me, like punching the walls, kicking in the doors, driving recklessly. And all those things are a way that somebody who is bigger and stronger than you holds power over you because it's it's threatening, right? So like that this person could hurt you if they wanted to. And so with the coercive control and with my dad, we had kind of patched things up. We had moved into a new home and my everybody was over, my extended family, my parents, for a family gathering. I don't recall what it was. We were sitting in the living room and my ex-husband just gave me a look and looked at my dad's feet and I was like, oh, my dad has his shoes on. So in front of like everybody at this family gathering, I like asked my dad to remove his shoes. He's already in the house, he's already sitting down. But I was like conditioned to like kind of do what I was supposed to. So, kind of like walking on eggshells, right? So because I was afraid of an outburst at some point. And so, yeah, it was embarrassing, and I really cringe about some of these things now. But at the time, I felt like it was the right thing for me to do. And does it really matter if somebody is wearing their shoes, right? No, not really. So anyway, that was a personal experience I had with coercive control. As a member of the church, an example that comes to mind pretty quickly for me is this example that, like, if you are not temple worthy, attending the temple, you weren't sealed to your spouse, married in the temple, your children aren't going to be with you when you die, and your extended family won't be with you when you die. And that's a pretty big carrot to dangle in front of people, right? Like, once you die and you're in the next life, whatever that is. Now, I mean, in the church, it's very defined, but it's also very narrowly defined for only a certain number of people who meet a very specific but arbitrary set of criteria. But that's an example of a way somebody can be like, well, I better say yes to this thing, and I better um, stay married to this person, even though I'm so unhappy. I just wish that it could all go away. And I dread my life every day. But if I don't do that, then I won't be with my family. And I love my family and I love my children. And I want to be with them, right? And so you kind of get set up to make these decisions about your life from this perspective of, I guess I want to call it like you make your decisions out of fear, right? And I don't know, maybe coercive control isn't always about fear, but I would guess it is maybe most of the time about fear. And so, yeah, it's just an interesting thing. And after I was divorced, I went back to school to become a therapist and finished my bachelor's degree and got a master's degree in social work and became a licensed clinical social worker here in Utah. The more I learned about systems and systems theory and like how, like, a family is a system, a church is a system, a place of employment is a system, our entire country is a system that has leaders and people and workers and people who do certain roles in each of these systems. Like in a family, in a Mormon family, a typical Mormon family, it's the father who presides because he holds the priesthood, and then the mother, the woman, she defers generally to him because he has the priesthood, and she is also likely made covenants in the temple. In Mormon temples, women make covenants to, it used to say, I believe, obey their husbands, and then it said to, I believe it was, look unto your husband as he hearkens unto the father. And I'm not sure what it says now because it's been a long time since I've been. But they do change the wording of that periodically, but it's still like the idea is like, okay, he's in charge. You have to defer to him. And you've already been kind of conditioned to do that throughout your life as a girl in Mormonism. And so, yeah, so that's a thing that happens. And so um, it's just a piece of that in the church where women are set up very well. So to play this role of mother, and I don't know, I think younger members of the church now may not be so heavily defined in their gender roles and who does what in the home. But I do think for older generations, my generation, and still in a lot of maybe fundamentalist parts of Mormonism and fundamentalist members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because there will be a whole range of people who are devout and who are not so much, right? So, but I do think the very devout people will still most likely hold to these gender roles. Right? So the dad is in charge. He works, he provides for the family. the mother takes care of the children. She, takes care of the home. Sometimes she works, but it's, um, when I grew up, I was taught very clearly that that women should not be working and employed, and that we should sacrifice that for the sake of our children and our homes and be homemakers. And so that's what I aspired to as a teenager when I decided to embrace the teachings of the church. As a teenager, I hadn't fully decided that, but when I did, I took it very seriously. And then, yeah, so people have roles and systems, right? And so the problem with where this can be problematic in any system really, is when there is not equality, right? So in this system I just described, of from my perspective, a more typical Mormon family, is there's not equality, right? In who's in charge, right? It's not like a true partnership where the husband and the wife, like, really wrestle with the decision together and both are given the same weight. Like often I've seen this so many times where women's voices are not taken as seriously as men's, and especially when it comes to abuse, women are often not believed, and that was my experience. I was not believed, and I was told a lot of different things about that I'll get into another time. But my abuser, my ex-husband, his word about things was privileged over mine because he was a man, and because he, um, for longer than I realized, I think probably the whole time I was married, I didn't even realize that behind my back, he would undermine me. And I mean, I had heard him talk about other people in his family and my family, neighbors, members of our congregation. I'd heard him talk about other people in like a derogatory way and criticize them for not being as devout or worthy as they should be. But what I didn't realize is that he was doing that to me too, and that he kind of had these narratives about people that were something that he clung to. I'm not quite sure if he actually believed them all, maybe, but I also think they served a purpose for him. They like made him feel better about himself. They made him look better than these people because he wasn't doing this thing that he was talking about them about, right? And I mean, I was pretty naive, um, admittedly, very naive, and I had no idea that he was doing this about me as well until the events happened that kind of made me rethink everything after 20 years of marriage, and get some outside help and some outside opinions, which I'll talk about another time. But very naive, very trusting, trying to be the best Mormon woman I could be, right? And full on believing that, like, when I needed help, my church would help me and my bishop would help me, my stake president would help me. Like, I believed that with like my whole self. I believed it. And I found out that it wasn't true. And it um, was the opposite, actually. And so, kind of really challenging piece, right? So, if people don't hold equal weight in a system, there is a power dynamic, right? And the people that hold the power, like in the Mormon church, the men hold the power. And there's a hierarchy for men in this system of power, but any man, any 12-year-old boy has more power than an adult woman. So, um, and I bring this part up because understanding abuse is almost always, about power and control. And somebody wanting to have power and control over another in whatever way they can do that, whether that's like by physical threats, whether it's by this coercion, whether it's by, like emotional abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse. Like the person with that power uses it so there is this power differential, and there's no equality. And so when this happens in any system, in any family, in any church, in any political system, in any workplace, that's where abuses of power happen, and where abuse happens in general. And those without the power are victimized. And we see this really commonly today. Like I'm recording this today on February 9th, getting ready to launch my new Instagram page and a new project for me that's really near and dear to my heart. And it's going to be called Dear Becky Bee. And I'll explain more about that in a moment. But like here on February 9th of 2026, the United States is like immersed in this scandal of the Epstein files, and the president of our country being mentioned in them so many times, more than anybody else besides Epstein, probably, and his sidekick, Glenn, or and none of the perpetrators who were involved in this sex trafficking ring for decades in the United States have faced any charges. None of them. Zero of these men who went to this island that Epstein owned to use under teenage girls and boys and children, exploited them sexually. There have been zero consequences for them, like none. And how does this happen in a system that claims to revere women and their gift of motherhood and creating children? And how does this jive with this idea that we are, as a country, pro-life and pro-children, and we need to have children? And I have 5 children. I'm not saying I'm not not non-children and non-marriage or any of that. That's not what I'm saying at all. But to me, it is absurd and it makes no sense. The only way I can make sense of this is we have these systems that are overrun with corruption of power because there's so much inequality in them. As much as the United States lays this claim to being this country divinely created, and Mormonism has taught this as well, that our country was divinely inspired so Mormonism could be revealed to the earth, and so Columbus could come to the United States. And all of this is just like this manifest destiny story about how God left this huge North American continent to be taken over by these people. Never mind the people who already lived here, and they are degraded in the Book of Mormon and because of their darker skin. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent. But anyway, our entire country is built on this system of inequality and abuses of power. And over time, this has become more and more evident to me. As a child growing up in the 70s and 80s, I believed very much that the USA was a great country. We were people who helped other people. We were people that, liberty and justice for all. I mean, I believe that. I mean, yeah, I was a little white girl in Utah, and I had no reason not to believe that. But the older I got, the more I realized that's it isn't the case. And we have many systems in our country that are corrupt, and the power differential is so way off that, like, if you don't have generational wealth, or you haven't figured out a way to become rich off your crimes, for example, like the grifter in charge, like, that, you can't get anywhere. You can't get justice. I've seen the disparity now that I didn't see before. And unfortunately, I am one of those people that it had to happen to me first before I believed it. And that makes me really sad, because as a teenager, one of my really good friends and I, she and I could see some of this already happening in our LDS ward when we were kids, like how the boys in our ward got different treatment than us girls. And I kind of knew it, but then I lost it because I got really caught up in this idea of Mormonism being the answer. And it was a way to save my kids and my family from addiction, from problems in the world that, because you're so taught that, like, wickedness never was happiness, and that there's this direct reward system for obedience to the commandments in the church. And so if you do XYZ, you serve in the church, you pay your tithing, you go to church every Sunday, you try to teach your kids all of this, that you're going to get all of these rewards. And gosh, it's a bitter pill to swallow when you realize that that's not real and it's not true. And that they use that as a way to keep people coming, and to keep people paying their tithing, and to keep people um, in this system. Then sure, parts of it may be beautiful. Um, the idea of it, I think, can be lovely, and the idea that, like, um, if you are good and you do what you're supposed to, you're going to be blessed. But it's just not true. And bad things happen to everybody, and it's not because you were bad. It just is life. And living with that guilt and that shame, that because something bad is happening to you, like a chronic health issue or a family problem, because you were not good enough. That really sucks to live that way, and to be so down on yourself. And uh, it's just really hard to, when you've believed in it so intensely. I joke around a lot and say I was a hardcore Mormon, because I was. And I think during those 2 decades when I was married, I think it brought out the worst in me sometimes, because I was so much more judgmental and unkind. Because I feel like for me, being in the church created this dynamic, this thing of, like, this competitiveness, like, who can be the best, like, who can do the most, right? Who can work the hardest and do all the things. And, there's people joke about this in the church. And after they leave the church, I hear this every time from somebody who's left the church, is like how you would always look to see if somebody was wearing their garments, which is the underwear that Mormon adults wear after they attend a Mormon temple. Um, they wear this underwear, and so you can see it. You can see it because, like, there will be lines where you're through your shirt and your pants, and so that's one way that people, like, look to see, okay, if so and so's not wearing their garments, like, well, what did they do wrong, right? Because there's, again, that list of arbitrary requirements that a bishop and a stake president will use to decide if somebody is worthy to go to the temple, worthy to get the praise of God, worthy of the blessings of the gospel. And I call it arbitrary because, some of those criteria are from the 1800s when there was that, oh shoot, I can't think of the name of it, the temperance movement. And when coffee was, there was this movement in the early 1800s in the United States where, um, you know, coffee was bad, caffeine, tobacco, alcohol, and sure, some of this can be problematic, right? Alcohol can be problematic, right? But like, it doesn't make somebody a bad person, or, you know, it's not a descriptor of who they are as a person if they drink coffee. Um, and, there's this other piece to this too, that like people lie when they answer these questions that are asked of them, so to decide if they're worthy, right? So it gets really messy and it messes with people's minds. And it's like this, some people call it a prosperity gospel where like you're supposed to prosper when you do A, B, C, D. But it doesn't always happen, right? Because there's this inequality and not everybody has the capacity to prosper financially, right? For many reasons, poverty, mental health issues, disability. There's so many things, right? So many factors. But the LDS Church is very much this church of prosperity, and if you're not prospering, you are a lazy son of a bitch, right? Like, sorry, I am gonna cuss. I cuss a lot, and my parents, bless their souls in heaven, um, are not gonna like that, but I will cuss. So, if that bothers you, I'm sorry, but I will drop some F bombs. But anyway, this idea that if somebody isn't doing well, it's their own damn fault. And I'm not here for that anymore. So anyway, so I'm launching this project called Dear Becky Bee, where I'm going to like share some things that I thought I knew and that I have since learned I didn't know that well. And I'm also going to, excuse me, share some of my own personal experiences um, that led me to where I am today, through my marriage and my divorce and my soul crushing journey with figuring out these things about the church that I loved. It's very much like Dorothy when she sees the man behind the curtain and realizes that the great and powerful Oz, just this man behind the curtain who's kind of scamming everybody. And once you see that, you really can't unsee it. And um, I've had many very well intentioned people who I know love me, and it's coming from a place of kindness for them and care, say things to me like about the church and being in the church. And I understand why people still stay in it. When they hear about these injustices, like what I personally experienced, or even more prominent ones where there are like public disclosures of abuse. Um, there was a podcast in 2025 called The Architecture of Abuse, which details very thoroughly and what done very well that talks about child sex abuse in the church and how much that's covered up. And I've seen this multiple times in my work as a therapist, how many times the church and families in the church cover up child sex abuse. And but I understand there are these hooks, right, that hook people. Like if you have a loved one that's passed, that has died, and you want to be with them again, these hooks that families can be together forever. Um, these hooks about the blessings, right? Keep people in it. But as for me, in my house, um, we saw the man behind the curtain, and we can't unsee it. And we're good, we're great, and we're fine, and we're learning to thrive in this environment. So anyway, I hope that you will join me on Instagram and YouTube, and in the future, I will periodically put out. I'm going to try to put stuff out a couple of times a week, 2 or 3 times a week, maybe a little more, about some of these things, so I can create awareness, and so I can create a place where people know they are not alone if they have been through these things, and that it does get better, and life is so sweet and can be so beautiful after you are out of a system that coercively controls your life, and that you can be a good person and you can be happy and you can find peace. And anyway, I'm super excited about this project. Again, my name is Becky Bowles. My business is Through the Woods Counseling. I will put links to my website in the notes. If anybody is looking to reach out and connect, I'd love to hear from you. Also, we'll be providing, again, I provide trauma-focused therapy in Utah, and coaching outside of the state of Utah for people wanting some assistance in recovering from abuse. And I'm really looking forward to this project. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and because it's making me so vulnerable, I've been really afraid of doing it. And I am trying not to make my decisions out of fear anymore. And so I am going to rip the Band-Aid off, and here we go.